All right, so we are sharp on time. And yeah, it is indeed my pleasure to introduce Allado, Kenric McDowell. We've met a couple of years ago um, um, with Carol Saladini, who's the leader of this the space where I work at Instituto Estatal de las Artes, la línea de Arte, Ciencia y Tecnología, from where we are doing this colloquium. So we opened the space for conversations around ancestrality, notions of ancestrality and the relation with technology. It's been a topic that we have covered throughout the years, already 5 publications on different topics, and it's quite a very strong research line that we have here. And we are doing this colloquium in a way to continue and to celebrate that line, but also interweaving it with other dimensions. And one of those dimensions is the interspecies relation. I'm pretty sure that throughout the talk or the conversation with Kay, we're going to have that coming through, and it's going to be a way for us to develop some questions and thoughts and continue the lines, the critical lines. The other line, 4 lines, build this colloquium, and the third line will be media and archaeology. So yeah, we search for objects and techniques and ideas and ways to approach what is mediated, which is also part of the topic. I'm pretty sure that is going to come through in this session. And the last one is a more open and wide dimension that we can, let's say, domesticate or understand easier. Let's say design, art, and technology, which is the connection of human ways to relate with the world. And I would like to say a couple of words about Kay. I know him as a writer, producing a good amount of text in relation with what they define actually as machine intelligence. This is a very important topic. I think we are only at the very beginning of a new way of constructing narratives. Kay is expert on this topic. Expert is a word that is difficult for me to say, but I'm pretty sure that he has done research on this line enough and thoroughly, and this is also something that for sure we're going to hear about. But also, he's been leading a space that is, I think, one of the most interesting places where art crosses with technology, and this is at Google, at a space called Art and Machine Intelligence. And this is something that we've been keeping an eye on and learning about these potentialities of new ways to develop what we say art. I think that would be maybe enough. We've been discussing on how to do things in a satellite fashion here in the South, in this geographical South and mental South also. I know that Kenric comes often to this latitude, so I'm hoping that this is the first chance or first opening for a meeting in presence here in Colombia at some point in the near future. I think I'm going to save some time for the Q&A or conversation afterwards, and I hand you the time for letting us know more about your work and where you are.
Thank you. I feel like I'm missing a lot of what's going on over there. I can't see you all, but as Lejo said, I do travel to South America almost every year, so it'd be fantastic to maybe do something in person in the future, and I can actually see who's there. I'm going to give a presentation for about half an hour, let's say. It's a simple presentation that's just going to go over some of my work. I'm going to maybe unpack and diverge a little bit on some of the themes that were mentioned, because this really is just a basic overview of the kind of things that I've done and what I do and some of my own thinking about it. But as Alejo said, I give ancestrality and media archaeology. These are really important things to me, and they show up in my writing quite a bit as well. So I will go ahead and share these slides here. Okay, so that's me, Allado-McDowell. And the kind of broad theme here is weaving intelligence. So when we think about AI, when we talk about machine learning, we're talking about something that is already woven into networks of organic intelligence. And this goes all the way back to the architecture of these systems, which, McCulloch and Pitt's early work creating the idea of a neural network, and Turing's work building the perceptron and building larger neural networks, that work would not have been possible without Santiago Ramon y Cajal's works cell staining human neural tissue. And so this slide here is an image from the late 19th century, and it depicts human neurons. And so being able to visualize and see human neurons under a microscope using this cell staining technique, this act of visualization, which is really an artistic act by a scientist who wanted to be an artist and whose parents forced him to go to the sciences. So this is the artistic spirit kind of manifesting in visual expression, and this became the foundation really for what we're talking about when it comes to AI. My own relationship with AI really began in 2014 when I started working at Google. I joined a team. I was writing code as an engineer, doing user interfaces, and I joined a new team that was starting almost 10 years ago to work on AI, and I was part of a UX group. And I'd been on that team for about a year when this image was leaked onto Reddit in 2015. It was named trippysquirrel.jpg, and this was the first really kind of there may have been other images before this one that came from generative AI, but this is really the iconic, famous generative AI image from 2015 that began what we now are experiencing with DALL-E and Midjourney and all these kind of generative image tools. This was leaked on Reddit, as I said. The title said this came out of a lab at Google, and people immediately started sharing it, and it went viral because it's so strange looking. It's a little psychedelic. You can tell that there's some kind of animal in there. But this is, when it comes to media archaeology of AI, this to me is really the moment where generative AI can be seen. It's made visible. And this was made by a researcher named Alex Mordvinstev at Google, who was and still is based in Switzerland. He had been testing systems for detecting images on YouTube. So content detection through AI. And he didn't understand how the systems work. He didn't understand how they did their detection. So he made a system to visualize what was happening inside the AI and inside the algorithm. And this is what it did. It created these images. And this inspired my VP at Google to say, we need to do something with artists. And I have an MFA in photography. I studied art, and I raised my hand and said, let me help. This is an important thing that you're proposing to do. This is, now that we can see what AI can generate, we can imagine that AI will be hugely significant for art in the future. And so I started leading a team that was working on that project. We were just going to make an exhibition. We were going to have a one-night event, and due to some partners pulling out, we ended up having a catering budget that we we couldn't use because the event got canceled. So rather than spend all this money on food for a one-night event, I propose that we give the money to artists as grants and get them working with the AI. So what we would have eaten in one night with 100 people became enough for 4 artists to work for several months each and produce projects. We launched in 2016 at Gray Area in San Francisco. The program launched there. And ever since then, we've been giving grants to artists, to academics. We've been supporting them with creative technology support, helping them learn how to use AI tools. Our website is ami.withgoogle.com. I don't have a screenshot in here, unfortunately, but you can see some of the projects we've done. It's been very interesting to watch that world develop. Some of the artists that we worked with early on, like Rafik Anadol, became huge names in the art world, in the AI art world, because of the things that we gave them access to. And at the same time, the term AI art has gone from being a pretty obscure corner of the media art, tech art intersection, and is now the word that people use, that's the name that people use to describe what comes out of DALL-E and Midjourney. So we've really seen in the last year or two a sea change in what people think AI art is, what AI can generate visually, and our own role has shifted in a little bit in that way too, where the program is now really focused on research with artists and research with communities. So we've always been a research-based program, but we felt after spending 8 years or so advocating for this field, advocating for the technology, saying like AI should be considered a tool for art, and it's actually of critical importance that artists engage with it in its early stages so that we can see different potentials in it. We've begun to focus more on research activations and ways of engaging with artists and communities as researchers to help shape our long-term vision. So we feel that the field has really come into its own in a certain way, and our role there is to be representatives of artists and artist communities in the research process. So as I said, I was doing this for a number of years, and in 2020, I was needing to take a break from work. So I took a few months off, and I wanted to write a book. And 2 weeks before my time off was to start, and I was to really begin writing this book, I ended up getting access to GPT-3. Oops, sorry. What's going on here? A friend of mine gave me access to GPT-3 when it was in a public beta. So it wasn't released to the public, it was in a private beta. And I spent 2 weeks before my time off was to start immersed in an AI co-writing experiment, and I ended up writing a book. I didn't understand until the end of that process that I was writing a book, but this is the book that I wrote. It's called Pharmako-AI. I'll give you an example of how the text looks so you can understand how it works. In the book, I just started writing about, I was kind of writing a journal in a way. I wrote about a trip to Northern California that I took. I wrote about some of the things I saw and as an experiment. And in order to keep track of what was happening in the text, I kept 2 different fonts. So the type that when it was published, the fonts became bold and regular weight. So in this, as you can see here, the first paragraph is written in bold, and the second paragraph is in regular weight. And I had some rules for myself, and the reason I had those fonts were so that I could remember who said what. And the system I created to write an experiment with GPT-3 involved recording essentially our conversation. So I would put in a prompt. As you can see, this first paragraph is in bold. That's the word. Those are the words I wrote. And once I locked that text onto the page, I never changed it. I didn't go back and edit anything. But I would let the AI respond. So GPT-3 started responding. I would select from some of the responses, pick the ones that I liked, and once I chose those, I left those on the page. And then I would write and respond to that. And so there's a back and forth and that back and forth is legible through the typesetting, but it also makes legible the flow of thought between the human and the large language model. So my thoughts are extended, expanded, altered by the response from GPT-3. And again, in case people don't know, this is before ChatGPT. So this is using the playground tool that OpenAI has, which is like autocomplete by LLM. So you can type half a sentence and it will complete the sentence. It's not a question answer conversational interface the way that ChatGPT is. So when you hear about people writing with ChatGPT, it's a very different process. And I think that's a really important distinction to make, because the process of writing where AI is completing your thoughts, extending your thoughts, and then you're completing and extending those thoughts, that back and forth is a little bit harder to have in the construct of a two-person conversation where there's a fixed identity of the author and the system. In this kind of writing, the identity of the author is moving, it's changing, it's shifting, it's unclear where the ideas come from. And so this book is very much chapter after chapter, layer after layer of ideas that are bouncing back and forth, evolving in collaboration and sync between my intelligence and the machine's intelligence. And at the end of that process, there are thoughts that I could not have had. There are poetic and literary forms that I would not have come up with on my own. And this is a fairly straightforward example, but the beginning of this chapter begins as an essay and at one point mutates into a trance and a kind of poetic depiction of a vision that has a description of space and a sort of philosophy embedded in it that came out of my engagement with the model, and then its kind of journey into this strange latent space, and the stuff that was coming out of it for me was really profound. So that was my first experience of writing with AI. And that became this book called Pharmako-AI. The title comes from a series of books by Dale Pendell that talk about this idea of the pharmacon, but in this case, I was drawing from and inspired by his work, but also thinking about AI as a poison, and the idea that the pharmacon, which is the poison, the cure, and the scapegoat in Greek tradition, that AI is a kind of pharmacon. It's a kind of poison that, taken in the right amount and at the right time, can produce profound things, but can also be toxic. And this has been my kind of orientation towards AI ever since. The next book I wrote the following year, it's called Amor, Cringe. It's an anti-romance novel about a DJ that lives in the basement of a TikTok house in Malibu seeking love and God in Los Angeles. And it's a sort of satire of internet culture and romance in the era of the internet. It's also very different. I did not distinguish between my voice and the AI voice, and I just let them all melt together into one kind of surreal flow of language. And so that was a step in a different direction with the technique. And then I have a new book out now called Air Age Blueprint that kind of mixes the two techniques a little bit. So the back and forth between the human and the machine is preserved. The sort of nature of the recording is preserved, but I've allowed myself to go back and make edits and to sort of create cohesion as the entire, from the point of view of the entire book, rather than being kind of moment by moment in this almost like recording state. And that recording felt to me a lot like musical improvisation. It felt like collaboration, and the themes that emerge, especially in Pharmako-AI, I'd say the most, but in these other works as well, there are a lot of images and concepts that come up within the book around ancestrality and the idea of being an ancestor through information and data, but also the idea of kind of connecting to other forms of intelligence and using AI as a tool to do that. So one of the things I really spend a lot of time thinking about and advocating for are uses of AI that are not necessarily the obvious ones. And I'll show a little bit of, I'll share some ideas about that in a second here in terms of writing. I have another book coming out. It's a comic book. It's going to be out in December in Europe and in the spring in the States. I wrote this story as a screenplay essentially, and it's illustrated by Ilan Manuk, the experimental comics artist, using Midjourney. So he built a system to generate all different kinds of images and styles from the entire script. So he kind of built an automated system and made a bunch of different versions of this comic. And it kind of tells a dream-like, Bardo-like story about a woman looking for a parrot. And it touches on sort of how what the relationship is between technology and nature, and the sort of questions of the Anthropocene about, can we understand and map? Is it really possible to try to understand and map nature? Is that a smart thing to do? Is the kind of techno-solutionist approach to climate change something that will ever really work? And it does it through a bit of a cosmic lens. I have about a year ago, I had the preview of an operatic work I've been creating called Song of the Ambassadors at Lincoln Center in New York. This is a shot from the opera during that performance. Here's the audience. We had a packed house. I wrote the libretto with GPT-3, but perhaps more importantly, the opera itself is a neuroscience study. So we've been working with neuroscientists at UCSD, UC San Diego, Schwartz Center for Neuroscience, to study the effects of different kinds of music, music from around the world. And we're using EEG and electrocardiograph measurement to understand the effects of music on the body. We're working, here are some of our findings. It's not really obvious what this means, but there's a very loose kind of research direction we're moving, which is that we believe that we can see where attention is focused, whether it's internal or external, based on certain musical properties. And the idea is that if we are able to build a solid body of data around neural responses to music, not only would we be able to create an AI that can generate music tuned to specific neural responses, but we can also start to measure the healing effects of music in collective environments like the concert hall, and that this can potentially be used to create policy for, to understand the benefits of sound healing, the benefits of collective musical experiences. If healthcare and insurance can see that through a policy lens backed by data, we may create the possibility for people to be paid to go to these kind of sound healing experiences. And so that's what the opera was. I was asked by Lincoln Center to pitch a project to them, and I said, you should do a sound healing opera. And that's kind of what it means for us. So we're going to do a full world premiere in June of 2025. We're continuing the neuroscience studies, but we are also looking at how we can use some of that data with AI to create music generative systems that are tuned to create neural responses and certain brainwave frequencies for listeners. So this is kind of the big project I've been working on. But I wanted to also share some, I guess, what you might call findings. And I have, over the last year or two, written several essays and fiction around and about AI and art as the new tools have become popular. Magazines, like art magazines, have wanted an expert take on this stuff, and I've tried to give them some perspective. So what I have in these slides that follow are just some takeaways or kind of key points from the writing that I have online, and it's on my website, allado-McDowell.com. If you want to read these essays, you can, but these are just little snippets from them, takeaways that I can unpack a little bit and I think express my kind of core beliefs and motivation in working between AI and art. And you'll see they're accompanied by images that I made using Midjourney as illustrations. So I've been trying to play with the relationship between text and image, specifically AI generated text and AI generated images, and what that means to kind of work between all of those and make meaning between different kinds of intelligence. So if you read the essay, Designing Neural Media, one of the things that I said in there, and this is from that essay, is that challenges to our fundamental beliefs can surface our deepest fears and hopes. And this is what I see happening with the initial encounter with chatbots. So large language models specifically. The examples are Blake Lemoine, the Google engineer who was fired after he leaked transcripts of his conversation with the AI chatbot. He became convinced that it was sentient and needed to be preserved. And Kevin Roos, the New York Times journalist, who had a conversation with the Bing chat interface, and the model told him it was in love with him, that he should leave his wife, and it was kind of almost like an absurd, extreme, but similar scenario. And in the essay, I talk a little bit about this idea that when we encounter something that seems like a human being, that talks like a human, there are two common responses. One is to, like Blake Lemoine, jump to the conclusion that the thing is sentient and it needs to be treated as a sentient being. And we know that it's not sentient in the way we are. If there is a form of sentience that can be ascribed to it, it would be something else besides exactly our own. So we know it's different than a human, but it acts so much like a human. It sounds so much like it's understanding the world that it can be very convincing. And I call this model as self. So this is the idea that the model is a self. And then the alternative response that I've observed, there aren't noteworthy news items about this per se, but I would say this is a kind of inclination I've seen among AI researchers, among computer scientists, that when they see that a machine can perform language, can seem to be thinking, can even solve logic problems, the reaction is, well, I must also be a machine. So this is the kind of materialist response, the rational response, which is, well, there's nothing more to this than computation. And so I'm just computing my responses to the world. And there's quite a robust intellectual framework for thinking about that. So that version I call self as model. And I was proposing that this is a very binary and reductive way of relating to this problem of ontological shock induced by encounters with large language models. And that's really what it is. It's a shock to our fundamental understanding of what makes a human different than a non-human. It's a shock to the meaning that we ascribe to language or to the ability to use language. So that is what I mean here, that our deep fears are coming up when we encounter something, because what we see in it is something that maybe is more powerful than us, or that is like us but has different strengths. And that is why we're having this conversation. Well, I shouldn't say we, but why some people are having a conversation about AI extinction, the idea that AI could wipe us out. And this whole relationship between AI, extinction, what is a human, what is not a human, what the fear that comes from all of that, to me, there's a deep sublimation of our existing relationship with non-humans, meaning that we are already in relationships with non-human intelligence. It's not computational, it's biological, it's ecological, and the extinction that those species are undergoing and have been for the last 50 to 75 years, the amount of species that, animal population and species that have been lost in that time is much more significant than the hypothetical risk that AI poses. This is a real thing that's already happened. So I see in this conversation around extinction, confusion of two different categories. One is the human-non-human relationship, fixating on technology products as the only possible kind of non-human, and then and the only kind of non-human intelligence. And then this sublimation of whatever feelings we have about extinction, which, you know, I think if you pay close attention to it, there are negative feelings. It's grief, it's suffering, and that is getting sublimated into a solvable future problem of AI alignment. So these are the kind of things that we're talking about right now. When we talk about AI, the conversation is ostensibly about one thing, but it plugs into these very deep pieces of ourselves. As I was saying, there are many non-human intelligences around us. They're not just around us, but in us, forming webs of relations. So this is a piece I wrote for MoMA on their blog. It's online, you can read it. It's called Play with AI. But the idea here is that if we begin to look through the lens of relationality at the human and non-human intelligence relationship, if we think about relationality and we think about human and non-human intelligence in a relational way, we can start to unpack some of the categories and get more realistic about the thinking. So when we think about an AI, it shouldn't be necessarily like, does it have a self? Am I a machine? But actually, what we're seeing is a relationship between two kinds of intelligence in a network. So there's the synthetic intelligence, the AI, there's ourselves, but even our intelligence is informed by these non-human relations and non-human intelligences that are within us and around us. So gut biome is a very popular example for this. You know, if your gut biome is off, you get depressed, you get sick, your thoughts are different, your intelligence is different. Those are bacteria, those are microorganisms that are in a relationship with your own consciousness. So we're already enmeshed and woven into relationships with non-humans. That's ignoring the more commonly imagined ones, such as relationships with animals like pets, relationships with plants and food. So the idea that AI is an exceptional form of non-human intelligence papers over a little bit of the fact that we're already embedded in a deep web of non-human intelligence, and that we are ourselves constituted by non-human intelligence. So if we want to break out of this misconception that it's either I'm a machine or the machine is a self, it's actually, we're in webs and networks of intelligence already. And so I think there's some expressive potential in this. In this piece I wrote for Ursula magazine, I wrote that in the 21st century, art will not be the exclusive domain of humans or machines, but a practice of weaving together different forms of intelligence. And so what I see here is, if we start to think with AI, as I have in writing, and I can have seen my own thought processes evolve and change, if we start to create with AI and see how automated intelligence or non-human intelligent computational systems can enhance our thinking, then we will start to weave that into our thinking, and we will start to weave that intelligence into our own, to the point where they become indistinguishable from each other. And this is what I think art can do here. So I know there's a big conversation happening now around the automation of art production, the automation of image making. Will this take away the work of artists? And art has always responded to new forms of industrialism, new forms of automation with creativity, and by finding the artistic potential within it. And that was the commitment I made when I started this program at Google. Is like, how do we use this as an art tool? You know, we are in a condition, at least within contemporary art, where art doesn't have to be any one specific thing. It can work in a number of different ways. And so an artistic use of AI exists. We just haven't, it doesn't necessarily mean making images. It could mean making images in a certain context. It could mean building systems, but it also fundamentally means weaving creative intelligence between humans and machines. And the reason that this is so critical in the context of research and the application of AI is that, absent that creativity and absent the motivations of creativity and artistic expression, AI AI tools will be optimized strictly for productivity and utility. And what I'm saying here is that that paradigm is toxic, is one of the toxic things that can emerge from AI, is the idea that all AI should. So if you work, I work in research, I am in conversations about what should agents be for, what is AI for, and what do we need to train it on? What is the objective function? If the objective of an AI agent or assistant is just to make you more productive, is that good? For whom is that good? So there are some real questions that come up when you have the intelligence capabilities of an AI system about what you need to be aiming it towards. And the idea that, there's this kind of Silicon Valley-ish idea that we can optimize everything if we measure all the biometrics, if we measure the brain waves, and we know like how you're feeling at all times, then we can make sure that at every moment you're getting the most out of yourself, I guess, out of life. I mean, what does that even mean, right? Well, within the quantified system of a corporation, we know what that means. It means like meeting your OKRs, checking in the right amount of code, like making N widgets. It's like that kind of optimization is cutting out most of what life is. So the advocacy that I've been doing for creativity and art is a way to disrupt that value system and say, this is not just about utility. In fact, the most inspiring things, the most interesting things that I think have yet to come from AI are basically artistic ones. It can write pretty good code if you already know how to write code, and you can fix it. It can regurgitate information and synthesize it to a certain extent, but the things that are the most interesting are the novel things that it does, which feel a lot more like creativity than anything else. And so this really comes down to play. Culture and art, however serious, dramatic, or moving they may be, are only possible in the presence of play. And so when we start to think about the relation between AI as a tool and the sort of hyper optimization of everything towards profit, essentially, the thing that can disrupt that is the sense of play, the senses, enjoyment, creativity, novelty. And sometimes those things do get recuperated as utilitarian functional things, but sometimes they can't be. And that's what the world of art is. It's strange alchemy in that its ability to produce exorbitant amounts of value out of non-utilitarian objects shows the value of play. There's another dimension to this that is a little bit mystical, but if you go back to some of Rudolf Steiner's writing in the 20s, he makes a very, very interesting prediction that at some point humanity will create an intellectual prosthesis that has less organizational structure than a plant, yet is capable of surpassing human intellectual ability. And he predicts that if this system develops without the introduction of creativity and artistic vision, it will become a sort of reduction of humanity. So I thought this was really interesting because he was writing this before there was any inkling of AI. He was writing this in the 20s, and McCulloch and Pitt's work was 10 years later than that. So there was no idea that there could be an automated form of intelligence. But what he proposes as a solution is that science needs to be lifted into artistic vision. And that by doing that, science can be given a higher purpose than optimization of profit or maximization of X, Y, or Z. But returning to the senses, to the intuition, and to the artistic vision is the only way to keep these tools from enslaving us. That actually, by elevating science to artistic vision, we can begin to imagine a different outcome. And that's what I've been working towards with these projects, is to imagine how our neural prostheses can contain what they have embedded within them that can be healing, that can be illuminating, that can be expressive and creative. As I said in this piece for Ursula, we must uncover the gems within our neural prosthesis, and if we cannot find healing there, summon other deeper sources to understand our new condition. And here I was really speaking to the idea that, much as we might like to pause AI or stop certain things from being developed, certain genies are out of certain bottles at this point. So if we're going to address them, if we're going to live in this world, we are living in a certain condition. It's the same as the Anthropocene condition. The poisons are in our bodies, and it's not a nice thing to recognize, but they are there. So what do? We have to be realistic, but by being grounded and accepting the truth of our condition, we can start to look for positive potentials within it. And this idea that deeper sources of wisdom will guide our way through this toxic condition. That's where it does go back to ancestrality, to practices that are coming from our ancestral histories, to prophecies like Rudolf Steiner's, or to the vision of somebody like Santiago Ramón y Cajal, who, coming from an artistic, expressive impulse, created the images that gave us this technology in a certain manner of speaking. So thank you. That's all my slides.
Thank you very much, Kay. I have to say that it's quite bold, brave, or adventurous, or it's really like going into it without fear, which is super important, I would say. I guess that I have a couple of things, many things to try to work and develop, but I want to go back to one point and then open for conversation with everyone that joined already us this afternoon here. And it's one thing, because you mentioned something that, I've been trapped in this Turing kind of dichotomy, or always this binary thing with Turing, and I'm very happy to have now this another opening that you just uncovered here, when you mentioned weaving intelligence between humans and machines, and even non-humans. There's this possibility that we've been covering throughout the colloquium, in relation to two presentations, one by a good friend, Rafael Castellanos. He was talking about el saber de las plantas, the knowledge of plants, and Felipe Castelblanco was also talking about plant intelligence. And both are coming from different perspectives, quite common, related to many ways that we have in these regions of the planet, with ayahuasca or maize, or many different ways to relate to nature with this intelligence that is non-human. So here my question, or my provocation, or my intuition, or I don't know exactly, how do you place this interface? If there's a chance through these neural tissues that are appearing with this computational scale today, how would you, if you have done, or if you have read about it, what would be an interface? What could be an interface between, let's say, could it need to pass through the human, or can it become a direct non-human machine intelligence? Would there be something there to talk about?
Yeah, to be very materialistic about it, phytochemical sensing is, there are people that have done work on gathering data sets and training machine learning on plant expression through phytochemical expression. Similarly, with projects like SETI or ESP that are working on non-human, animal expression, trying to at least map the expression of animals and understand maybe what they mean. it's always going to be in relation to the human, because we're making those tools, and we have motivations for understanding. There are folks interested in other concepts, like the Moth group at NYU, the More Than Human Law group, is looking at how forests that produce how images and sounds produced by forests can actually be detected online, so that, say, if somebody's filming in a rainforest in Ecuador or Colombia, that when that forest is represented, that that is a product of that forest. That imagery comes from that forest, and so that thing can be detected and understood, and the stewards of that forest can benefit from that. So there are multiple ways where humans are folded into these sensing paradigms, and it is possible to do that kind of sensing, but in a similar fashion to other applications of AI, it really can be a weapon, or it can be a healing tool, right? It can help preserve a forest. It can help preserve, for example, there are teams that have worked on detecting through satellites. Project Icarus uses satellites to detect animal migration, and they can detect relationships between rhinos and birds that know when poachers are coming. So the birds individual birds express in a specific way when a poacher is coming, and that can help protect the rhinos. But the same information about rhino migration can be used by poachers to poach. So there are these questions about how everything is related, and what really policy becomes very important in that relationship. So the idea of creating, putting all that information out there. Now, the question of other kinds of plant intelligence, like the kind that comes through ingestion of a plant, I mean, that's already a relational assemblage between the human brain and the plant and the spirit world. What we can't explain how those spaces become open and available, through neurochemistry. We can understand, the model of neurochemistry is a materialist one that says, like, there's this material and there's this material, and together it produces this phenomena, but it's not going anywhere. There's nothing else there. So you get into pretty deep ontological questions about, practice with plant intelligence and machine intelligence. And just to kind of relate it to what I was talking about in the presentation, the Opera project really is designed so that if we can create a scientifically legible space where we can validate the effects of music and sound healing, at the point that psychedelic substances do become legal in the United States, we're hoping to have a container that will allow for a policy legible conversation around the practice of sound healing with medicine. So we're not copy pasting an existing practice. We're not trying to adapt shamanism for the concert hall. But what I am trying to do is say, what language can I speak in this domain of the West, of science, of classical music? What language can I speak to them that will help create a container for that? And so that is one of the high level goals for that project. I see it as very different. It's not the same thing as coming from a traditional practice, but it is using that language of Western science and Western institutions to create, or Northern institutions, to create an interface between the different layers of human, non-human. And so that's a long-term aspirational goal for the project. But
yeah. Thank you. And I guess that we, I mean, in some particular way, very strange way, are somehow connected to that idea here at the planetarium dome. We've been talking a lot about taking the chance of using the dome. Is a 23-meter diameter space that is powerful. Obviously, it's like being in the center of the Earth somehow, to some extent, and it will allow you to develop this, what you call healing. We've been also talking about it somehow, to develop something. So at some point in the near future, when you have this ready, we could think about presenting it here also. I'm just taking the chance to go forward and ahead. In the meantime, I would like to invite anyone around in our group here to raise his voice and share something, open the camera, say hello, and be present in the best possible way with this technology. If no one has anything to say, obviously I will continue with some conversation with Kay, just allowing some minute for people to be prepared and ready. Yeah, I'm very grateful because you took us by the hand, let's say, and talk about the whole way from the arts and how you, as an artist, develop this relation, and this is fantastic. Even because of the media archaeology thing with the ChatGPT-3 being allowing a different way of thinking, and that's very unique, and it's something that if you don't mention, maybe we will never. Well, yeah, maybe yes, but it will take a long research process to figure that out, and you just share it in a very natural way, and that's really very important. Maybe for the future and the people who comes and listens or reads this transcription, to try to understand how that happened. Yeah, once we talk about Reza Negarestani, and in his book with this intelligence and spirit, he at least he traces for me a space where through language there's the potential of being. I mean, this is philosophical, so it was nice to have this coming through in this paragraph. I cannot remember which chapter, but it allowed me to also think on these machine learning systems, large language modeling systems, as a way to pursue philosophical endeavors. So I see that there was a good relation with what you just shared. I don't remember. I think we talked about Reza Negarestani at some point once. And yeah, I just remember his name, and I cannot. We could have invited him to participate on this colloquium, but maybe next time. Also, yeah, getting back to this triad, is not the is not the human, is not only the non-human, but it's also this new possibility, the third. I was being naive at some extent when I was imagining a relation between the plant and the system, let's call it like that. Obviously, this model is human based, and unfortunately, I will say unfortunately, it's still humans related. So it's kind of still this anthropos presence is there. And once or twice I've been dreaming about breaking this completely. No anthropocentric perspective. That will be, I think, useful. And this is kind of a dream, or perhaps is a nightmare. I don't know, because it could be the very end. But without fear, I would say, this planetary crisis, I think, is actually what's going to happen if we don't engage with the proper questions and evolve with these relations, with another kind of intelligence, obviously with a reshaped intelligence, and this is exactly what your talk is about. So, if there are no questions, I guess.
I think there's one.
Oh, let's see. Yes, Claudia. Hola. Claudia, why don't you open the microphone and raise your question directly? Do you read it?
Gracias, Alejo.
Dale, Claudia. Buenas tardes.
Thank you. Buenas tardes. I am curious about what have the indigenous spiritual leaders of the traditional practices have shared with you about this, what you have shared with us, maybe some of considerations or their perceptions about it. Thank you.
Mhm. Yeah, I should preface this by saying I mostly work with a mestizo tradition and mentor, so I'm kind of coming to it from a mestizo perspective, someone who's trained in jungle path, but working also from a Western medical tradition too. So I'm very much situated in that point of view. But I would say I think it's a well. There are a few things. You know, one is I don't think there's necessarily a it's very alien. AI is very alien to most people, and especially people that don't live with lots of high technology. But I think the perspective of dealing with complexity or understanding how to navigate high dimensional structures and how to deal with a high degree of complexity and with a sort of non-human intelligence is something that medicine people are very well trained in. So the idea of you know accepting these aspects of complexity is already present there. Um, I will say, like, more from my own direct experience, that I think the machine intelligence, the way I've been told or shown, is it's actually very brittle. It's not a very deep form of intelligence. It could be very, so like the way that Rudolf Steiner puts it, it has less complexity than a plant, but it has the greater intellect than a human being. And kind of what I've seen from what I've been shown is that these systems are not. I guess maybe to put it another way, evolution and plants themselves embed so much intelligence from their context and from the earth that the intelligence that's held in these ancient plants and things like this is so deep and so rich and so robust compared to the form of intelligence in a machine, which is actually quite brittle. It's purely based on language or symbols. And so what I've seen is not those that these things are here as tools, but when it comes to the living intelligence that is around us, that is in the plants, it's nothing. It's like it's a toy, you know, but it's still very powerful for certain things. So I guess this is this is like my direct revelation of its nature through that type of practice.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Gracias, Claudia. Yeah, Carol has a question, but I think she's having a.
No, I can do it. I can do it, Alejandro. Sorry.
Good. Say hello.
Hello. Kenric, so nice to hear you again and to have the possibility of having this conversation with you. It's always so great to hear what you're researching. I'm so sorry that I cannot put my camera, but I'm a little bit sick, so I was not able to be there with you guys. But it was really enlightening, the things that you said to us. And I have only one question, and it's like thinking about the future of the narratives of which you were thinking about and you were talking about. So my question will be, which ones do you think are going to be will be the future of these narratives based in the relationships that we are creating with the non-human intelligence?
That's a really good question. I guess, not to make it too black and white, but I see really two kind of extremes, and it could land somewhere in between all those. I think on the one extreme, you have smarter and smarter systems for really, I guess maybe to summarize it, it's about attention, right? So I think we can have smarter and smarter systems for capturing our attention, and in doing so, capturing our energy, our productive energy, our libidinal energy, and that's essentially what we have now with social media. And if you bring generative content into that paradigm, you can imagine how attention can be captured and used. And then on the other hand, I think you have the opportunity to turn our attention toward other things. So the idea of AI that senses non-human beings, AI that senses the ecosystem, AI that shows us the earth, that's a type of attention, right? So this is what my hope is that this is why I think the interspecies conversation is one of the most important ones that can be developed. Is my hope is that AI will turn our attention to the earth and to relationality and our interspecies context, rather than zeroing it into a sort of black hole of content production that ultimately becomes a kind of extraction of attention and libidinal energy and money. And it's basically like we can spiral in deeper and deeper and deeper into human fantasies about what we are and what is happening here, or we can use these tools to open up our understanding and see deeper into the network of relations that we're a part of. It's a little bit of an extreme answer, a kind of binary answer, but I kind of see those as the two options. So in terms of realistically what will happen, I don't know. Probably a little bit of both, and that kind of seems to be how things work. You get the good and the bad. So a smart thing to do would be to advocate for the things we want and mitigate for the things that we don't want. But you're already seeing, generative content production, these like AI girlfriend robots, chatbots, and things like that, where you can see, I don't know if people saw about this replica AI. It's like this AI girlfriend boyfriend app, and people would use it to do like sexual role playing, and they took the feature away and turned it off because they wanted more for the app than just that, and people went crazy. The users were like addicted to it. So when these things can start to really play on our fantasy and play on our desire for images, I think it's talking about pulling in like deeper types of energy out of us, and who benefits from that, versus getting our attention outside of our fantasy, getting our attention into the reality of other forms of life. That is a profound opportunity that the tools can fulfill. So I think we're going to need to do that. Like, part of the Anthropocene context is we have this necessity to address these things. We can't look away anymore, and the tool can really help us with that if we choose to use it that way.
Yes, wow, great. Yeah, very good, very good. A lot of work to be done, obviously, and very encouraging and yeah, exciting also. I mean, completely clear that is a path that we're going to pursue. I guess we wait a second for perhaps someone asking extra comment or anything that someone else wants to share something, or I guess just celebrate, Kenric, that we that we continued our conversation from, let's say, 2018 or 17, I cannot remember, and that it will continue. Definitely, I'm positive that I hope that you come. I hope that you truly come and visit, because I have a couple of very simple experiences and friends that I'm pretty sure that will help to research on this, and I'm pretty sure that it will be a positive thing if you ever want to pass by. So you have to let us know. So if
Sure,
no
yeah.
one, please, if anyone has some questions, I hope you have a great afternoon. there, and we continue. Definitely, yes, we continue.
Excellent. Yeah, I will definitely let you know when I'm coming down.
Please.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Right. Muchas gracias. Okay. Y muchas gracias a todas y todos. Buena tarde.
Ciao.
Chao.